In this clip, Joe Rogan breaks down the evolution of bare-knuckle fighting. He hosts one of the world's most popular podcasts and is a veteran UFC commentator. Let's check it out.
Nate Diaz fight was, when was the last time Nate fought MMA?
It's been a while.
Probably 6 years.
It's been a while.
Was it,
Yeah,
is it 6
probably
years?
somewhere around there.
Which is kind of crazy,
Yeah.
right? And Mike has been fighting bare knuckle and fucking people up for quite a while. You know,
Dude.
He's an animal, dude.
Dude,
Yeah.
he's
found
tailor-made
his
for that.
sport though.
2022, so
Okay,
4
so
years
4
ago.
years.
4 years ago, he beat Tony Ferguson.
But he's found his way. This
Yeah.
is stylistically the best thing he could do for his career is fight bare knuckle, fight boxing. This is the best thing for him.
And Mike is like uniquely talented at bare knuckle.
Oh.
Like uniquely.
He's look. I'm being honest. I used him as my demonstrator for, Andy Foster is the executive officer in California, and he didn't like bare knuckle. I wrote the rules for bare knuckle long ago. And Dave Feldman came to me and said, "Hey, I need rules written for me. I'm trying to legalize this." Someone that I knew hooked him up with me, and I said, "Look, I'll write your rules." And I gave him 2 prices. And I said, I'm not doing it for free. It's too much of a pain in the ass. So here's my 2 prices. My one price is you don't say who wrote them and you just use them. And the other price is you say who wrote them. And it was because I knew I was going to get in trouble for doing this. And what does John McCarthy think he's doing? Now he's writing rules for that.
Did you write the rules for slap fights?
No, I don't like slap fights. I hate those. But so
You can't defend yourself. That's
yeah.
it. That's the only
it's
fucking
the
rule.
dumbest thing ever. So
Crazy.
Have you seen the other where they just run at each other?
Oh, it's even worse. They're like, hold my beer.
God,
Yeah.
You think slap fighting's retarded? Hold my beer. We're just going to run at each other full
and it's
blast.
called. That's what it's called. Run it. Right? Those things are crazy.
It's crazy.
But the whole thing with the Mike Perry thing is trying to get athletic commissions to start to understand, because they're all into this thing. Joe, it's like you take a look at MMA. I'm allowed to hit you with a shin to the dome, like you talked about. I'm allowed to take my knee and hit it to your dome. I'm allowed to take my elbow and smash you, even when your head's against the ground. I'm allowed to do all these things. But my bare fist is the big problem. Right?
It's kind of funny.
It's ridiculous. But it's perception, and perception is a real problem because people believe what they're saying. Oh, it's horrible. So, Andy Foster was one of the ones that he didn't like it. And I said, Andy, I tried saying, look, go through those whole things with the shin, the knee, the elbow. And he goes, yeah, I know. He says, I don't like it. I said, Andy, I need you to look at it this way then. I go, there are people out there that are made for boxing. Floyd Mayweather, Terrence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez, they're made to be a boxer. They have all this technical skill. You know what? They're just unbelievable. I said, there's these guys, same thing in MMA. There's the George St. Pierre's. You got the Alexander Volkanovskis. You got all these people, that are, Islam Makhachev was the last one I used. I said, they're made for MMA. I go, Mike Perry was an MMA fighter. I said, he's not made for MMA. He's a tough guy. I go, but bare knuckle, he was made for. I said, and this is a guy who can make a living fighting for bare knuckle. He can pay his bills. He can support his family fighting bare knuckle.
And become a star.
I said, and possibly get, sponsors and everything that are going to make it so he can live the rest of his life. I said, and you're going to say that you want to take that away because of a bare fist? I go,
John McCarthy's framing of Mike Perry as this fighter who was basically a square peg in a round hole for MMA, but perfectly suited for bare-knuckle boxing, is actually a great way to look at how hyper-specialization is changing combat sports.
It's a compelling narrative, but is Perry actually perfectly suited because of some unique combat blueprint? Or is he just a wild brawler who excels in a sport where technical defense is still in its absolute infancy?
It's definitely a mix of both. But think about his MMA career. He had decent boxing power, but struggled heavily once the fight hit the ground, or when dealing with high-level kickboxers. Strip all that away, reduce the weapon set to just fists, and his insane durability and pressure fighting style suddenly become incredibly elite.
Right. But McCarthy mentioned having to use Perry as a case study to convince Andy Foster from the California State Athletic Commission to approve bare-knuckle rules. Quick context for anyone unfamiliar. Athletic commissions are government panels that regulate combat sports, issue licenses, and hold veto power over whether a sport can legally run in their state. And what worries me is McCarthy's pitch to Foster, using one guy's career success to justify legalizing a brutal sport.
But McCarthy was appealing to Foster's humanity because the commission was blocking a sport based on aesthetic bias, not safety data. If a fighter like Perry can't compete at the highest level of MMA, but can legally make millions and secure his family's future in bare knuckle, why should a government bureaucrat stand in the way?
I understand the empathy there. And realistically, Perry's post-UFC career has been a massive financial triumph for him. But regulators can't base safety policies on whether an individual athlete can pay their bills. If that's the threshold, you could justify legalizing almost any hazardous activity.
Though, to be fair, the regulator standards are completely incoherent anyway, which is why Joe Rogan and McCarthy started roasting slap fighting. McCarthy's line about slap fighting having only one rule, you can't defend yourself, really exposes how bizarre these sanctioning decisions are.
Oh, absolutely. Slap fighting is essentially brain damage packaged as a circus act. It goes against the very definition of a martial art because defensive maneuvers are literally against the rules, which is just mind-boggling.
And then Rogan brings up Run It, where two guys just sprint at each other from across the room. It's like combat sports are devolving into backyard viral stunts, and yet athletic commissions are wringing their hands over bare fists.
Which is why McCarthy's argument about the hypocrisy of bare-knuckle bans is actually his strongest analytical point. He's pointing out that commissions are perfectly fine with a fighter taking a shin, a knee, or a spinning elbow to the face, but drawing the line at a bare fist.
Exactly. The visceral reaction to bare knuckle is all about the blood and the cuts, which look terrifying on camera. But from a neurological standpoint, there's a strong argument that bare knuckle is actually less damaging to the brain than gloved boxing.
The physics of that are solid. Padded boxing gloves protect the bones in the hand, which allows fighters to throw full-power head strikes repeatedly for 12 rounds. In bare knuckle, you can't punch someone's forehead at 100% power without shattering your hand, so fighters throw fewer headshots, and the volume of brain trauma is actually lower.
And that's why fights end quicker and with fewer sustained concussive blows. The glove was never invented to protect the person getting hit. It was invented to protect the puncher's hand, so they could fight longer.
That's historically true, but we shouldn't swing too far and pretend bare knuckle is safe. While the long-term concussion risk might be lower due to fewer repeated impacts, the acute trauma, like broken orbital bones, deep lacerations, and facial nerve damage, is vastly higher, which is what commissions are legally liable for managing.
Which is why McCarthy having to write the rules himself was such a crucial step for the sport's legitimacy. He had to translate that raw, backyard brawl energy into a structured framework that athletic commissions could actually digest and monitor.
And McCarthy keeping his name off the rules initially because he knew he'd get flack shows just how toxic the perception of bare knuckle was in the wider MMA community back then. He knew the establishment would view it as a regression, even if he was actually trying to make it safer through structured officiating.
It's the classic pioneer's dilemma. But looking at where bare knuckle is now, with promotions like BKFC pulling in massive numbers and fighters getting paid, McCarthy's pragmatism won out over the purists' squeamishness.
The pragmatism worked, but I still struggle with this idea that we should approve combat sports based on economic mobility for the fighters. When McCarthy told Foster, "You're gonna say you want to take that away because of a bare fist?" he's using a classic emotional lever that sidesteps the medical reality of what bare hands do to facial tissue.
But it's not sidestepping if the medical reality of MMA is already deemed acceptable by the state. If a fighter is legally allowed to get their face caved in by a knee in an MMA cage, banning them from doing it with fists in a ring is just a double standard that restricts their earning power for no logical reason.
The difference is MMA has a highly diverse set of defensive options. You can wrestle, clinch, or run away on a large canvas. Bare knuckle boxing forces you into close-range pocket fighting, where exchanging punches is the only path, which naturally inflates the risk of severe facial trauma.
To wrap this up, what McCarthy and Rogan really nail here is exposing the gap between visual aesthetics and actual physical risk in combat sports. McCarthy's story is a great reminder that regulation should be built on empirical safety data rather than emotional reactions to blood.
That's a fair takeaway. My lingering concern is that as bare knuckle continues to grow, we can't let the success of outliers like Mike Perry blind us to the severe physical toll this sport takes on the average fighter who doesn't have his freakish durability.